Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about parentification. So parentification is a characteristic pattern of enmeshed family systems. Anytime I see parentification dynamics happening in my clients or students' lives, I automatically know there is enmeshment going on there. So it is one of the sort of pillar patterns along with projection that happens in enmeshed family systems. So we are going to be talking specifically in this video about emotional parentification. There's also instrumental parentification, which I will refer to in a separate video. But emotional parentification is essentially an emotional role reversal in the parent-child bond inside of a family system. So before we talk about this role reversal, let's track back a little bit and talk about the primary purpose and function of the family system in nature. Because essentially, that role reversal is violating the primary purpose and function of the family system and of parenting in general. So the primary purpose and function of the family system and of parenting in nature. So if you think about us humans as one of the many species in the animal kingdom, very specifically a social species, meaning we use our social bonds to survive, to grow, to learn, to make our way through life in the wild. So the family system and parents, their purpose, their function is to provide an environment where new members of our species, aka children, can come into the world and can have a safe space where they can go through childhood and learn and develop and play and test things out before they become, or as they become, an individually autonomous member of our species. And they can go out into the wild and then kind of do the same process, right? Like repeat that same pattern with their own family, find their own mates and create their own families. And even if they choose to not, get married or have children, still kind of go out into society and become a functioning member of society that contributes to society. So this development of autonomy is super important, but childhood is the place where, you develop that. So it's really a unilateral, it's a one-way um, dynamic. Parents must give to the children, right? That is the point of parenting. So there is an emotional hierarchy, there is a generational hierarchy, which is healthy because the more developed, or the supposed to be more developed members of our species, hold space for the less developed members of our species to grow into themselves, to learn about who they are, to connect with their inner world, to connect with their unique talents and inclinations and build skills so that they can, again, develop this emotional autonomy. So children have a bunch of different developmental needs, the need for food, for water, for shelter, for basic physical protection. They also have a whole set of emotional and psychological needs. And so these emotional needs, their emotional development process is very messy. It's very confusing. It's very overwhelming. It's very demanding. They need all the help that they can get from other adults in their immediate circle and also their extended circle. So teachers, mentors, coaches, extended family members, community members, friends. They need so much space held for their emotional development process so that they can learn. They need mirroring, they need validation, they need to learn how to put language to the things that they feel. They need to learn how to contain their own emotions, regulate themselves, process and understand what they're feeling, and therefore make good decisions, good behavioral decisions for their lives. Learn how to separate behavior from emotion, learn how to separate what they feel from what they do with what they feel so that they can behave constructively for themselves and for others in their social environment. So it's a very, very demanding process. Parents need to be incredibly emotionally present for their children. And parentification essentially violates this primary function, this primary purpose of parenting and of the family system. It crosses generational boundaries. It violates the generational boundaries and the generational hierarchy. It violates the emotional hierarchy. And so children now feel like they need to meet the emotional needs of their parents. Okay? The parents are pulling from their children. instead of giving to their children, pulling emotional energy, pulling emotional space, pulling emotional presence, pulling emotional regulation instead of giving. So some examples of this could be like that child playing therapist for one or both of the parents, or even for other younger siblings, for example. It could be, being a confidant and having to listen to the secrets and to the problems of their parents. It could be that they end up being a conflict mediator between their parents, or between one parent and other family members or other people in their lives. It could be that they are, in general, helping other family members process their emotional lives, right? Feeling responsible for the emotions of others, feeling responsible for soothing, for caretaking, for regulating. It could be that they're feeling responsible for other family members' depression and anxiety and loneliness. It could be that they feel that they have to be a companion, right? Instead of living their own social lives and developing their own capacity for socialization, they have to play companion to their lonely mother, for example. Now, children feel compelled to this. They feel obligated to do this because, again, children depend on their parents for survival. So there is a loyalty conflict, there is a loyalty bind. They need their parents' support, they need their parents' approval, so they will learn to do whatever it is that is expected of them inside of the family system, because it's just a survival strategy. Now, this is all happening at the unconscious level. Most parents and children are not playing into this dynamic maliciously or on purpose. Okay? It's often happening because of a multi-generational transmission of this emotional immaturity. So we pass down enmeshment from generation to generation. So if a mother is doing this to her child, it's very likely that this was done to her as well, and so on and so forth, going up and back in the generations. It also is often a product of the family system dynamic. So when there is an absent father or an emotionally unavailable father, for example, the mother comes to feel very emotionally burdened. Maybe she doesn't have an ecosystem or network of other adult support that can provide her with emotional nourishment. And so she ends up unconsciously pulling from the child. So you also have to look at all of the relationships in the family system. What's the mother's connection to her own mother and to her own father like? Does she have a lot of support there? Are her parents emotionally available to her? Is the father, again, is her husband or her partner emotionally available to her? Does she have friends and extended family members and community members that are emotionally available to her? Because if she is also emotionally deprived, she's going to end up pulling from the child emotionally. Again, oftentimes unconsciously and not maliciously, but nonetheless consequential for the child. So let's talk about the consequences for the child. So because of the child having to focus on meeting the parents' emotional needs, they essentially shut their own emotional process down. So again, remember, they're going through a very complex and demanding emotional development process. They're very emotionally needy, but if they have to focus on their parents' emotional needs, they will choose their parents over themselves because they depend on their parents for survival, for physical survival. So they will learn to suppress and shut down their own emotional processes, their own emotional needs. They will internalize shame about that as well. They will feel like, oh my gosh, because I feel these things, I am bad, right? Because I have emotions and needs of my own, I am bad because they are taking up space in a place where they're not supposed to be taking up space. Like, my mom's needs are more important, right? So my needs are not allowed here, but I still have them. And so what do I do? Right? So they develop this suppression process, this emotional suppression process, normally with a whole host of, coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, personality habits. Could be like, they could develop mental, behavioral, emotional symptoms and illnesses. They could develop addictions and substance use disorders. They could develop all sorts of numbing mechanisms like obsession with TV or scrolling on the phone or video games. In general, they could just kind of like shut down. You could see them internalize, or maybe they externalize and they act out behaviorally. So there's a number of ways that they end up dealing with this, but the core issue is that they are being emotionally neglected. They are being emotionally deprioritized. And so they have to then emotionally neglect and emotionally abandon themselves. They have to shut down their own emotional processes. And this is a recipe for disaster. We can't shut down who we are emotionally. We need to be able to take up space and learn what to do with our emotions, especially as children. So, downstream effects of this could be, again, addiction. It could be mental and emotional illness. It could be intimacy disorders, right? As that child starts to enter their young adulthood and their adult lives, and they go out to find partners of their own, or they begin to relate romantically or emotionally with other human beings, they're going to repeat a lot of these patterns. So they learn to be emotionally unavailable to themselves, and then they find emotionally unavailable partners as well. And so this creates problematic dynamics in those relationships, intimacy and commitment issues, right? They will also probably repeat this pattern, pass it down onto their own children. So again, parentification, as I said, is a multi-generational process. So how, how do you begin deconstructing this and unraveling this, right? First and foremost, awareness, of course. Awareness is the first step. Awareness that this pattern is even happening. Oftentimes, children will feel like something feels off here, feel very emotionally burdened, very emotionally overwhelmed by my family system or by a specific member, like my mother or something. But they won't essentially know how to name that, or they can't put their finger on it because again, it's normalized in the family system. They're implicitly taught that that's what they're supposed to be doing, even though it feels wrong. So coming into awareness is really important. And oftentimes this happens because kids, not kids, young adults come into this realization of like, this feels really, really heavy and I'm not able to do this anymore. Like I'm getting sick from this. I'm depressed. I'm anxious all the time. I'm overwhelmed. I can't live my own life. Or you hit an existential crisis. And so then maybe you seek help, or maybe you start reading things, maybe you watch videos like this and you realize like, oh my gosh, this is the pattern. There's parentification. So you come into awareness and you realize this is not supposed to be happening. So interrupting the pattern and setting boundaries with it is the next really important step after awareness. And then starting to become more emotionally available to ourselves. And we're going to have to take ourselves through a reparenting process, right? Parenting that emotional aspect of ourselves, that inner child that has been emotionally neglected our whole lives. So it's quite a complex process. It's quite difficult and challenging. It can be very painful and create a lot of emotional discomfort along the way. But in order to live emotionally healthy lives, it's necessary. So it becomes very, very necessary in our adult lives. And then lastly, I think, very important at a later time, or maybe during the healing process, is creating emotionally reciprocal relationships. So oftentimes when we were parentified, again, we repeat the pattern by finding partners who are emotionally unavailable. And not just partners, friendships. A lot of parentified children go on to be therapists. I know I'm one of them. So I think creating a healthy network of people who are also emotionally available to you, and you're not the only one, like playing therapist for other people, or holding space for others, or emotionally caretaking, or solving the problems of others. So creating a network of emotional resources, having a good therapist who holds space for you, maybe joining support groups, adult children of alcoholics, or any other support group, like going on retreats and things like that, where you can actually, for the first time, have space for your emotional process to be unfold, to be worked through, and you be able to learn how to navigate it. And so finding finding partners who are emotionally available, who you can talk to, who will be empathetic, who will listen to you, who will hold space for you. And it's reciprocal, right? You do the same for them, but it's not just one way, like it was in your childhood, or like you probably kept repeating in later life. All right, guys, thank you all for being here. Let me know what your experience of parentification has been in the comments below. I'm curious to do more around this. I'm going to be launching a series on the parentified daughter, which I know is an experience a lot of us have had. The parentified eldest child also is a common dynamic, but parentification, I think, is, the essence of enmeshment. So leave your comments down below. I'm curious to hear about your experiences so I can do more videos around this for you all. Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.